The movie begins with a couple named Jamie and Lisa. When Jamie was fixing the sink drain pipe accompanied by Lisa, suddenly someone pressed their doorbell. Then Jamie went out to check, but no one was there. There was only a large package. Jamie and his wife opened the package, which turned out to be a ventriloquist's dummy. For info, a ventriloquist's dummy is a puppet used in a belly voice show. The package was indeed intended for Jamie, but it was not clear who the sender was. Then Lisa played with the doll, and she said that she wanted Chinese food. Lisa was reminded of a poem from a ghost story in her home village when she was a child, which read, "Beware of Mary Shaw's gaze. She has no children but dolls, and if you see her in your dreams, never scream." Then they put the doll down. And Lisa asked Jamie to go to a Chinese restaurant to buy dinner. Meanwhile, Lisa waited at home. She laid the doll on her bed and strange things began to happen. The doll's head suddenly changed position because it looked creepy. Lisa covered it with a cloth. Even though it was noisy in the room, suddenly the sounds around her disappeared and the atmosphere became quiet. Lisa immediately heard a laughing sound in the room. She went into the room to check the sound, then approached the doll. When she was about to open the cloth, suddenly Lisa was thrown and made her hurt. She saw something in the room that then pulled her. At the same time, Jamie, who went to buy dinner, had arrived home. Jamie immediately went to the kitchen to prepare their dinner. A moment later, he heard Lisa's voice calling him from inside the room, so he immediately went to her, but his steps were stopped because he saw a blood spatter in front of the door. He also heard a small laugh from behind the cloth. Jamie thought that Lisa was teasing him, but it seemed that he suspected something behind the cloth, and after opening it, Jamie was shocked because his wife was dead in a terrible condition, with a tongue that had been pulled out. Soon, the police arrived. Then Jamie was examined by a detective named Jim. Jamie was suspected as a suspect because there was no sign of other people entering their house. During the examination, Jamie told Jim that Lisa's death might have something to do with a package containing a doll he received. Because according to the legend in his village, ventriloquist dolls are bad omens and bring death to those around them. Of course, Jim didn't believe it. Long story short, due to lack of evidence, Jamie was finally allowed to go home, but he remained under surveillance. When he got home, Jamie checked the package box again. Then he tore the inside and found a logo that read Mary and Billy. Mary Shaw is a ventriloquist legend from where Jamie comes from. It is said that she always uses a puppet that she names Billy in each of her performances. So we finally find out that the puppet's name is Billy. Long story short, Jamie decides to return to his hometown in a small town called Raven's Fair. When he arrives at his father's house, he is greeted by a beautiful woman named Ella. She is his father's young wife.
I'm so glad to have you home.
Then he meets his father, who is now suffering from a stroke and has to be in a wheelchair. Since Jamie had not been home for a long time, he did not know that his father was sick. From this you can guess that the relationship between father and son is not good. But his father made sure that he had changed and was not the same as before. Then Jamie conveyed the purpose of his visit, and he asked for a poem that was often read by his mother, which read, "Beware of Mary Shaw's gaze. She has no children but her dolls, and if you see her in your dreams, never scream." Ella said it was just a fairy tale, but Jamie denied it because adults believed in it too. But according to his father, the town is a small town where people still like to believe in superstition. Because he was not satisfied with his father's attitude, Jamie chose to leave and immediately take care of the funeral for his wife. Then he went to the house of someone named Henry. This Henry is a person who usually takes care of a funeral. Henry said that after the letter from the police was complete, it was possible that Lisa's body could be picked up that night. While waiting for his wife's body to be taken care of, he stayed at a motel. He also brought Billy's doll, which was placed not far from him. Then at night, strange things began to happen. The sound in the room slowly began to quiet, and the atmosphere became silent. While he was sleeping, Jamie heard someone calling him. He was surprised, and suddenly Billy's doll was in front of him. He saw the shadow of an old woman from behind the curtain, which turned out to be the form of Mary Shaw. Jamie immediately turned on the lights, but he found nothing there. Meanwhile, Henry had brought Lisa's body to his house for makeup. Then he opened the body bag. Henry was shocked when he saw the condition of Lisa's body, and he immediately documented it because it was part of Henry's job. A moment later, he heard a voice from down the hall, which turned out to be his wife named Marion, who was hiding in there. Marion thinks that silence has come, and she thinks she'll be safe there. The next day, they start to bury Lisa. In the middle of the forest, Jamie sees a woman, and suddenly Marion comes to him. She asks if Jamie saw the person who killed his wife. Then Marion read a poem about Mary Shaw. But before she finished the poem, Henry arrived and asked her to go home immediately. Before moving away, Marion had said that she had to bury the doll. Then Jamie saw a tombstone, which turned out to be the grave of Mary Shaw. After that, Jamie immediately returned to the motel and took Billy's doll to be buried. On the way, Billy, who was sitting next to Jamie, was seen occasionally glancing at him. After arriving at the cemetery, he also found a tombstone with Billy's name on it. When he checked, it turned out that the chest inside was empty. Then he immediately put Billy into the empty chest, but before Jamie closed the chest, Billy had turned his face towards Jamie. But Jamie didn't care and closed the chest. After finishing, Jamie returned to the motel where he was staying. And when he arrived at the motel, Jamie was surprised because Billy was already in his room, even though he had previously buried it. It turns out that it was Detective Jim who brought Billy's doll there. Secretly, this detective followed Jamie to the cemetery and took Billy out of there. Jim thinks that he has buried an evidence of his wife's death. Jamie also explained that the doll he received came from the cemetery, and he just wanted to rebury it. He also explained that there was a ghost story named Mary Shaw, who was buried with his doll collection. Jim then asked, was it the ghost who had killed his wife? But Jamie said he doesn't know, but he believed that whoever sent the doll, then he was the one who had killed his wife. Finally, Jim left, and he also took the doll, which he thought was an evidence. The next morning, Jamie secretly entered Jim's room to take Billy's doll. Coincidentally, Detective Jim was staying next door. After taking the doll, Jamie immediately took it to Henry's house. Upon arrival, Henry said that the doll belonged to Mary Shaw, a phenomenal ventriloquist. He had seen her perform as a child. Then Henry told him how the performance took place, so that this was the beginning of all the terror in the city. Mary Shaw was carrying a chest, but there was nothing in it. Then she called a name, Billy, who turned out to be in a chair that Henry was sitting on. She asked Henry to bring the doll to the stage. Then Billy thanked Henry. Mary Shaw was a woman who looked quite old, and she had no children other than her doll collection. While performing, there was a little boy who was a bit annoying. This boy named Michael Lawson, who turned out to be the younger brother of his grandfather Jamie. Michael said that he saw the movement of Mary's lips, which meant that the doll was not talking, but Mary was doing the voice of the doll. Mary Shaw, who looked upset, then said to Billy. The little boy named Michael said, "You are a doll," and he said that I was the one who filled your voice. Then Billy's puppet got angry and said that he was real. But Mary asked Billy to ignore it and continued the show, but Billy became even more angry, and he started arguing with Mary Shaw.
Listen to me, that's enough!
The audience who saw it was amazed, as if Billy's puppet looked very real.
Now, who's the dummy?
Then, a few weeks after the show was over, Michael Lawson suddenly disappeared, and not long afterward Mary Shaw was found murdered. But it seems Henry is still covering up who the perpetrator of Mary Shaw's murder is. It is also known Henry's father at that time was an undertaker, and in her will, Mary Shaw asked that all her doll collections be buried with her body, and if in total, Mary Shaw had 101 dolls. Even Mary also asked Henry's father to make himself a doll before he was buried. Henry, who at that time was very curious, went to Mary Shaw's chest to see her body, but when Henry climbed on the chest became unbalanced and eventually fell with Henry. There Henry saw Mary Shaw's body, whose appearance had been changed to a doll. Suddenly Mary was standing in front of him and preparing to attack Henry. Lucky his father came. And strangely Mary Shaw's body was still lying on the floor. Since then the town of Ravens Fair has been hit by a terrible terror and many mysterious deaths have occurred there. Then Henry showed photos of his family who had been mysteriously killed, and all of them were found without tongues, including Lisa, his wife Jamie. Hearing this, Jamie decided to go to the theater where Mary Shaw was performing. But Henry tried to stop Jamie. Then Henry reminded Jamie of the words that Mary Shaw had once said, that he will not stop chasing anyone who mentions his name until he hears a scream. As if not believing, Jamie decided to go to the theater anyway, because he was still curious about the person who had sent the doll to him. At the same time, it turned out that Detective Jim went to Mary Shaw's grave. He planned to dig up the grave to check the grave of Mary Shaw's doll. But when checked, it turned out that all the graves were empty. On the other hand, Jamie uses a boat to get to the theater. It looks like the building has been abandoned for a long time. Then he opens a chest and finds there is a book, which is a way to make a doll perfectly. In the book, there are also news of missing people, including Michael Lawson. Not long after, the room suddenly became quiet. And suddenly, from behind the mirror, Jamie saw a corpse sitting in a chair, then shortly disappeared. Because the theater felt terrible, he immediately left the place. We return to Henry. While at home, we hear his wife talking to someone. The person said that their family had leaked a secret, and he intended to punish Henry's family. Henry, who heard, then went to him, and it turned out that Marion was talking to Billy's doll. Henry, who looked angry, took the doll, Then he immediately looked for a scoop and planned to bury it again. A moment later, he heard a voice down the hall. He thought it was Marion who was there. Then he checked it out. In there, Henry kept calling his wife's name, but all he heard was a moan. Suddenly, the door closed by itself. He asked Marion to open the door immediately. Then there he saw a hand, and suddenly Mary Shaw appeared in front of him. In surprise, he screamed. Then Henry died with his tongue pulled out. As you know, Mary Shaw can kill if her victim screams. After returning from the theater, Jamie went back to his father's house. He wanted to ask for an explanation about Mary Shaw because he found a name Michael Austin in Mary Shaw's book. Then his father told him about an incident in the past after Michael Austin disappeared. His family, along with the residents, flocked to Mary Shaw. They accused that Michael's disappearance was Mary's doing because Michael had previously interrupted her performance, and they were sure that Mary had kidnapped Michael Austin. Even though there was no proof, they took the law into their own hands. They forced Mary to scream, and then they cut out her tongue. But it didn't end there, because Mary Shaw took revenge on them. One by one, they were killed, and their tongues were cut out, just like when they killed Mary. Even their wives and children became victims of her revenge. His father also said that he sent Jamie away for a reason. He did it because he wanted to keep Jamie and his wife away from Mary Shaw's curse. Although in the end, Mary Shaw still found Jamie and killed Lisa. Then Jamie immediately left to find a way to stop Mary. It turns out that Detective Jim is already in front of his father's house. Based on his investigation, all the dolls in the grave are gone. His suspicion of Jamie is also getting stronger because he has stolen the Billy doll from his room, which Jim thinks that the doll is an evidence. He also plans to take Jamie to the police station. But suddenly Ella said that she got a call from someone, which turned out to be a call from Henry, who asked Jamie to go to the theater because he wanted to show something. But as we know that Henry was previously dead, and that means the person who called this was Mary. Jamie then tells Jim that he can prove everything at Mary Shaw's theater, but Jim still wants to take him to the police station. Jamie pushed Detective Jim away and ran to the car to go to the theater. Jim immediately followed him. Arriving at the theater, Jamie immediately looked for Henry and called his name. But suddenly Jim was behind Jamie. Jim also said that Henry didn't seem to be here because there were only 2 boats to cross to the theater. One was used by Jamie and the other was used by Jim. If indeed Henry was here, then how could he cross to the theater without a boat? Then suddenly they heard the sound of people singing. They both immediately looked for the source of the sound. Arriving in a room, Jim found a doll, but because Jim was fed up with Mary Shaw's dolls, he threw it behind him, and it turned out that behind the curtain were all of Mary Shaw's doll collection. All the dolls were there, except for one doll, Billy. They also found a boy's corpse stored there, and it was certain that the child was Michael Austin, who had disappeared for a long time.
It's me. All right, I get it.
Suddenly, all the dolls in the cupboard looked to the side, and their eyes fell on a clown doll sitting in a rocking chair. Jamie then called Mary Shaw's name as soon as the clown doll stopped rocking. Mary's ghost, who was behind the doll, said everything she did was revenge for the people who had killed her. Then Jamie asked her to explain why his wife was also killed. Then the clown doll asked Jamie to come closer. And he also said that in Lisa's body there was Austin's bloodline, which means that at that time Lisa was pregnant Jamie's child. Mary Shaw's revenge is not only to the people who have killed her, but also to the whole family, to their descendants. A moment later, Mary Shaw, who was behind the doll, stuck out her tongue, and without further ado, Jim immediately shot her. Then the doll in the closet slowly began to move, and Jim continued to shoot her. Because Mary Shaw could live in the dolls, they had to destroy it immediately. Then Jamie threw his lamp into the closet, which made all the dolls burn. After that, they rushed to get out of there. But unfortunately, Jim fell from above and he screamed. The scream also killed him because Mary immediately took his tongue. While Jamie, who was still hanging, was surprised by Mary, who made him fall. Fortunately, the floor below was fragile and made him fall into the river. After burning all the dolls in the theater, he remembered that there was one doll left, Billy. Then Jamie rushed to Henry's house, because last time he left Billy there. When he arrived at Henry's house, he found Marion, who was crying over Henry's death. Marion also said that Jamie's father had taken Billy and left. Jamie also began to suspect, because his father was always in a wheelchair. How could he go to Henry's house and take the doll? But to make sure, Jamie immediately went to his father's house. And sure enough, he found Billy already there. Then suddenly Mary Shaw appeared from behind the window. Jamie immediately took Billy and burned him in the fireplace. This also made Mary Shaw in pain, and she went out through the window. Then Jamie approached his father, and he accidentally saw his father's hollow back. It turns out that all this time Ella was using her father to manipulate Jamie. She used her belly voice skills and made it seem as if her father was still alive and talking, even though Jamie's father had long been dead. Jamie also remembered a book he found in the theater, How to Make a Perfect Doll. And it turned out that the picture of the woman in the book was Ella. Then suddenly Ella was behind him.
Who's the dummy?
And it turned out that Ella was a perfect doll that had been made by Mary Shaw. Jamie became hysterical and he screamed, and in the end, Jamie died. Jamie's death ended the descendants of the Austin family. It means that the revenge has been resolved. Then Mary Shaw closed her book and the movie was finished. We can guess that the one who sent the Billy doll package to Jamie's house at the beginning was Ella, who was the perfect doll made by Mary Shaw. And from here it can be seen how terrible the revenge action carried out by Mary Shaw. All the families and even the descendants of the people who killed her were slaughtered. Thank you for watching and see you soon.